You are.
Good evening. Please rise for the pledge of allegiance. The United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I ask you to stay standing for just a moment. We've had the loss of two very important souls in our community over the last week. Many of you will remember Chief Joe Halachi, who served as police chief in the 90s. The term before Tom Fabiano. He passed away in Florida last week. And at the beginning of last week, we lost Bill Pickens, a longtime leader of the community, in the entire community, certainly in his home community. And he was buried in Oakland Cemetery on Saturday. So if we just take a moment of reflection for these two fine citizens of our village. All right, thank you. I have no idea if this is going to work. Is this working now? 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 How about now? Now.
Yeah.
All right, I call the meeting to order. This is the October meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Incorporated Village of Sag Harbor. We have a full agenda. I thank you all for coming. And this is a good moment to mention, I guess, that we are being hosted by the Sag Harbor Fire Department as their guests for this, the November and December meetings, for which we are very grateful. And
but it brings to mind that we do have work underway for a more permanent solution, including the dealing with the matter of sound in the room, as well as broadcast through social media or other devices that may or may not be available. And Trustee Corish has been leading that effort. I've concluded so far two things. One is that it's complicated, two, it can be expensive. So we're asking him to solve miracles here, but we are on the case. But in the competition for resources, there's a lot at stake. But so thank you for bearing with us. This is going to be up live streaming on YouTube as we go. Hopefully, we've got a better setup for the sound than we did last time. That said, I would ask for a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting, the regular meeting held on September 14, 2021. Is there a motion? A second?
Second.
All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
The motion is agreed to. The minutes are accepted. Motion and would invite a motion to approve the minutes from the executive session held on October 8, 2021. Motion, is there a second? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
I will give the mayor's report and then we'll go into the regular session. I want to report with great favor and enthusiasm that this year's Harborfest and this year's American Music Festival was a return to something approaching normalcy in this village. I think there was a spirit on both occasions. A lot of people came downtown. The vibe was a good one. The weather cooperated for the most part. And I would say on the last 2 days of the music festival, there was a spirit in, as it happened, Steinbach Park, where we had the second stage. The music festival this time was able to do a substantial tent in Marine Park and one of these rollout stages in Steinbach Park. And I think in the case of Steinbach, it was an introduction to a lot of people to this new asset in the village, but in all events, to just a very good time. A lot of the music was talent was local, and a Saturday night, if you were anywhere near Steinbach Park, there were a couple of hundred people in there. 100 of them were dancing. Kelly and Kerry had put out hay bales for seating and play, and the little kids took them over. They scattered the hay, and you had adults dancing, kids running around like crazy, and music from the stage, and it was a great night. The sunset was especially sensational. And so I think if there's such a thing as coming out for this village, it felt very good in these last couple of weekends that the village felt so good for so many people. Couple of questions that have come to me, I'll just give you a report on what's not happening tonight. With the action in Albany on matters related to cannabis, we are given a role in public policy on this through the governor's program, which confers all the way down to villages of our size an authority to regulate some elements of the use of cannabis going forward. And it becomes immediately a very complicated issue. Each of the local levels of government is involved in it. So we have, for our part, 2 towns, each with their own villages. And I honestly was hoping that there'd be some uniform policy that we could all be part of, but it's getting more individualized than that. But I don't have anything for you yet. We're just heading out into that ground, and hopefully we'll have as much public input as we can. We are given an option of opting in or out of local activity and so forth, but it's coming. But we have not yet turned our attention as a board. We've not yet heard from the professionals and lawyers who are involved in these matters. The chief has been very attentive to the subject, but we're not ready to make a recommendation to the village as yet. As we go through the meeting tonight, we will be introducing in the form of amendments to the earlier introduced waterfront overlay district legislation, and we'll get to that in due course. We have joining us at the table is Senate President Liz Vale, who you know as our village attorney, and Kathy Eisman of the Nelson Pope and Voorhees environmental and engineering firm that has been our consultant on the development of this code, and one of the real troopers in this long journey that we've all been on. And they will present the draft as introduced tonight. With that said, I would turn to the treasurer for the treasurer's report. Tim?
As of August 31st, 2021, the revenues are up. Mostly, this is due to our increase of docks revenue that we brought in, as well as from our building department inspection fees. Then also we have new revenues with our parking meters. That has brought quite a bit of money in as well over the past 6 months, I believe it is. As for expenditures, we're right on target, about 23% for the year, being a quarter through the year. We have some savings over the prior year due to the village having upgrades with the COVID regulations, which we're hoping to be reimbursed through the federal grants. And then also our sewer fund has additional expenditures as well through the year, mostly due to the infinite pump expenditure that we had. But as of right now, we're looking good for the year going forward throughout the end of the year.
Are there any questions for Tim? Motion by Tom, second Hayden. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. The treasurer's report is accepted. Thank you. We hear a motion to accept the August bank reconciliations and collateral report, which is in your packet. Is there a motion? Is there a second? All those in favor indicate by saying aye. The motion is agreed to. Thank you. We'll do now the departmental reports, and I will lead off with report of Public Works. A very busy month in the Public Works Department. Completed the repaving of 4 principal streets. Howard Street, Bayview Avenue, Meadowlark Lane, and West Henry Street has been completed. And kudos to the department and all the good work that they did. The sweeping of sand and debris continues throughout the village. New drainage catch basin was installed on Meadowbrook Lane over this period. The department probably carried some of the bigger burdens in connection with all of these activities, particularly the Harbor Music Festival. And it was, as I hope made clear, these were very successful events, and in no small measure because the Department of Public Works supported it vigorously and did a deal with all of our space requirements for that. Tree trimming, fall tree trimming has begun in the village, and that is going forward. And the Highway Department brought the sifter down to Windmill Beach and conditioned that sand, which is looking very good, and was back over at Havens Beach for some additional work. One small matter to mention from the activities that have impacted on the Public Works Department is that in the surge of population we got on the nights, the big nights of these events, we had a clog in the Bay Street facility. And I don't know how to say this delicately, but in the COVID period, more people are using handy wipes and sandy wipes for their hands, and you can't put them into the system. Waste baskets for those. So the big clog we had was made up principally of these wipes. When I looked at the ads down the island, the Scavonis, and they brag on the boxes that they're indestructible. Well, if they are, please don't put them into our system. Put them into the trash can. Just completed a new look at the boat ramp on Bay Street, and you know that the Yacht Club completed a new configuration of its property along Bay Street, a very good looking deck and rail and so forth. But there's a question of where the property lines appropriately should be. And we have a very important piece of drainage piping in there that comes down from all the way up to High Street. So that's an issue that the department is looking at. And we will shortly have an announcement at DPW on the fall leaf program, which begins over the next few weeks. So that is the report of Public Works. We had for the harbor report, September was, how do you measure these things? I'll tell you, $412.21. The waterfront is thriving. People are coming. They are staying. You know, I keep a boat on the waterfront. I wander up and down and encourage them to spend heavily in our village. I recommend places for them to spend, which is any store on Main Street, any door on Main Street, go in and spend. But the season has been a terrific one. During this period, there were 16 marine patrols conducted by the department. We had one call for service, one call for noise, a couple of people cited for unsafe operation. We had 2 disabled vessels, 1 abandoned vessel, and 1 illegal anchoring. When I look at all these statistics for the month, these are very low numbers. And so we came through the month in good stead. There is now an RFP out for the first phase of replanking of Marine Park. If you're down there, you'll notice that the timber is so old now it's beginning to curl, which creates a danger. So that will be a piece of work to be conducted going forward. You know, we are in a system called DACWA. This is the online system for reserving spaces, and it has become a very important source of information and income for us. People go through that system, they make their reservation, they take a small percentage, we get the booking, we don't have to run our own administrative service in support of our reservations, and that has contributed materially to our income on the waterfront. The year-to-date total on our waterfront gross income is $1,315,822.48. That's up from $998,000 a year ago. So they're not in the waterfront business. Oh, yes, we are in all of its dimensions. One of the nice features of being in that system is people who visit here and have an experience are able to make comment about their visit. And I'm not going to read them all tonight, but I have here a handful of testimonials from folks who visited here this summer. What strikes me as a common thread in all of them, and absolute kudos to Bob Borey and the department about the courtesy, the helpfulness, the good spirit of our young dock workers. They receive people at the dock, they assist in the tie-up, they are good on information. If there's a problem, and occasionally there's a problem, somebody tries to come in sideways, some of the things that happen in the dock. Attentive crew, peaceful atmosphere, great times in Sag Harbor. Dock hands were very helpful. Great facilities and personnel. Wonderful stay at the Village Marina. Guys working on the float were great. We enjoyed our overnight stay. Location was convenient and quiet and scenic and peaceful. The marina is clean, staff is helpful, attentive and friendly. So when you see see Bob and you see the young people, we still have a couple on duty as we finish up the season. Say a word to them, as we do with our TCOs. This is the time of the season to let them know how much we appreciate the good work that they do. And in this case, we can show how it translates to actual income, which is always good to have. The court report, the court is showing an increase now in volume, and that, of course, increases income associated with the court, not back to where we were, but on its way back, and working under the difficult conditions of still being under a lot of COVID controls. but just to give you one number, we had in the month of August, opened cases, including parking cases, 2,075 cases. That's a lot of tickets, that's a lot of activity. By September, that number was down to 571. So when you look for a surrogate that describes how many people are coming, that tells you the story. And in the same period of time, the court was able to close 1,680 cases, which is a very good number. It's a lot of work, a lot of activity. And that number was down to 1,100 in September. So thanks and congratulations to the court. The next report would be from our Commissioner of Police and Public Safety and Deputy Mayor Tom Gardella.
Thank you, Mayor. Last month, the Sag Harbor Village Police Department answered 642 calls for service. Out of that, we had 26 motor vehicle accidents, we had 17 arrests, 3 DWI arrests, and 40 uniform traffic tickets were issued. On behalf of the Sag Harbor Village Police Department, the chief and the officers and myself, we would like to offer our condolences to ex-chief Alachi's family for his passing and thank him for his service to this village. He was the chief before Tom Fabiano. And our condolences go out to his family. So that's the police report for September. As far as the fire department goes, in the month of September, the fire department volunteered for over 1,139 man hours. During the month, the officers and members of the department responded to 34 calls for service. These calls included 2 structure fires, 6 carbon monoxide incidents, and 3 motor vehicle accidents. I would just remind everybody that October is Fire Prevention Month. So please make sure that your fire smoke detectors and your carbon monoxide detectors, that you change the batteries and that they're operating properly. During the month of September, the members of the fire department participated in the 20th anniversary memorial service of 9/11. That was in East Hampton at the Windmill. We also participated in the Tunnels to Tower Run in New York City. I don't know if people are familiar with that. It supports the Steven Silver Foundation, which then in turn supports building smart homes for disabled veterans and first responders. I believe the department donated almost $10,000 this year to that foundation. Chief O'Brien, are you available?
I believe that number is about accurate, but we're still collecting some more money for that. The last 2 pancake breakfasts we did, we put the proceeds towards that same fund. This was my first year participating in that event, and it was pretty incredible. As you run out of the tunnel, they have FD1 members lined up holding flags and pictures of the people who were lost that day, and it raises your hair. I'm still here right now, so it was definitely an incredible day.
So the story is that Steven Siller, who was a firefighter, New York City fireman, during the 9/11 incident, he was recalled. He reported to his firehouse, which was at the entrance to the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. And he could not get through the tunnel because traffic was stopped. So he grabbed his turnout gear, ran through the tunnel, ran up to the World Trade Center, and perished with his fellow firefighters when the tunnel collapsed. So his family has taken up this effort to raise money in support of disabled veterans and first responders.
And just one more thing, if I could add, 94% of the money that they take in goes out to like homes, scholarships. So as far as fundraisers go, they're definitely one of the more giving back. They don't profit on it.
So I think it's been 15 years now that I've been doing it. So the department is committed to this for at least 15 years now. And the numbers keep growing as far as donations go. This month, Suffolk County Education and Extension Board recognized 4 of our members. Chief Kevin O'Brien Jr., Second Assistant Chief Michael Geyer, ex-Chief Robert Bory, who's also our harbor master, and ex-Chief Philip P. Garapy. with the Medal of Valor for their life-saving acts during a structure fire in October of 2020. So thank you to those members. I believe and that's the fire department report. As far as the ambulance goes, the month of September 2021, the ambulance corps responded to 69 emergency calls, 4 work nights, 2 meetings, 9 training sessions, and 3 standbys for a total of 1,036 man hours. The Sag Harbor ambulance supplied an ambulance to stand by for the fundraiser supporting the grandstand renovation at the park. They also supplied an ambulance to the standby for both days of Harbor Fest. And finally, they also participated in the 9/11 ceremony in East Hampton. And those are my reports, Mayor.
Excuse me, thank you, Tom. And Aiden Corish for the wastewater department and village grants.
Thank you, Mayor. I will start with village grants. We're in a wait and see phase at the moment. We have a number of applications out there that are currently being considered. One of the biggest ones we presented 2 weeks ago, myself, John Parker, Jennifer Messiano, our grant writer, and Mark Wagner, our consultant sewer engineer. We're on a Zoom call with Southampton Town Board as part of a process for $470,000 to do all the engineering design work required for the ongoing service area expansion program. This application has already been reviewed by the CPF Water Quality Committee and have been presented to the board and recommended that they approve it. We were there to answer questions. Seemed to go well. We're hoping in November, December that we'll get some good news, and so that the engineering design for the Southampton side of the town, Area K, can join the already underway work on the East Hampton side, which is Area L, which will allow us to sewer these 2 areas that are in desperate need of some help because of high groundwater. So that's the report for grants right now. As far as the sewage treatment plant itself goes, for the month of September, and we received 2.457 million gallons. We removed 25,100 gallons of sludge. DMO reports were forwarded on 10/12/21. Suffolk County DHS inspection date, the next inspection will be 10/25. And as always, New York State DEC inspection date is open. We had no complaints for the month of September. And summary of operations: wastewater treatment plant running well and under all permitted levels. We're now just using 3 of our 5 basins because of the summer season behind us. Activity on Main Street is beginning to decrease, and so each one of our basins can hold 50,000 gallons. So it gives us we're running out about 150,000 gallons now. The maximum plant can deal is 250,000. We had 2 alarms in the plant for the wet well, which is a big silo about 30 feet deep. All the problems were resolved. Benson Contracting were our maintenance operators. They were out to adjust some pressures on the pumps in the dry well, and they replaced a battery pack in the dry well. So all checked out well after that. Flow decrease from August to September was approximately 571,000 gallons decrease. There, with your permission, I'd like to give a little update on the technology that we're looking at.
Absolutely, please.
So I get to deliver this, kind of gets to do all the work. The village reached out to 6 audio. This is talking about hybrid Zoom meetings in our regular meeting room. So we reached out to 6 audio video companies, come take a look at the current setup and what we could do to incorporate Zoom into our meetings. We only heard back from 4 out of the 6, and 2 of the 4 declined to take on the project. Currently, we've received 1 proposal, and that so far is the amount is in the low $20,000 range. These are all just quick estimates. However, good news is September 29th, we met with Rhodey from the village of Sagaponack, and the village of Sagaponack is currently set up and running hybrid meetings with a really interesting setup. So she gave us a full tour. She gave us a lot of her time. We were there for about an hour. Of the meeting room, explained the programs, how what they were using, and showed us how their equipment worked. We checked everything out from the video to the sound. And it's pretty impressive. Basically, their system is if you're watching at home, there will be one camera, there'll be one screen would be the board, one screen would be the, what we'd like, one screen would be the podium, and possibly one just to show everybody who's in the room. And everybody interacts just like you would do on a regular Zoom meeting, except we have live sound and video from the room. She also shared the contact information and all the pricing, which was great. So we get a lot of homework already done. And Connie has been in touch with the same company. A technician has come to see the meeting room, and we're currently waiting to hear back from them. So we're hoping that as these next two meetings go along, that we could meet all this in January. And that we can, we're also going to have to find the money in the budget somewhere, and that's always going to be something we can discuss at the appropriate time. I'd just like to make one mention about paid parking. It finished last night at midnight. So we've had our first experiment. We have a mountain of data. I'm going to be pulling all that together, and I hope with the mayor's permission, we will have a presentation, maybe a short presentation in November, so I can tell you, who was here and how much they spent and how long they stayed, and how we're going to get them back next year. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Aidan. In Sagaponic, what meeting room do they use?
As you enter, the office is to the right, and the meeting room is straight back to the left. They had the most interesting sound setup, which I know is a huge deal for us. They had one strip of a microphone hanging in the ceiling out front that gathered all the sound from the room. And as well as looking at how they were running the meetings, we also sat and watched some playbacks from the meetings. And it was pretty impressed. I'm not sure if it's going to be the exact same setup for us, but what they had really worked for them. And that's the important bit. So hopefully what will be proposed for us will really work for us. So sound was good. Video quality, they were using one camera that would turn around. I think, given the nature of how busy we are, that having a separate camera for the podium and one for the desk and maybe a third one, so that people get a full feeling of what's going on in the room, so that you can see what's going on. It seemed to work quite seamlessly. No doubt there'll be a couple of.
How does the size of that room compare to our?
About the same size. The room seemed big for, it is about the same size.
I feel like they have taller ceilings.
They have taller ceilings. They probably have better. One problem they have is echo, so we might want, as far as the sound goes, so there are panels, something called acoustics make, which you can apply to the walls, so you can take that echo down. They also have two big screens. We might be 4, depending on how we want it. So when you're presenting also from the podium, your presentation can show up on the Zoom screen. So, and it would need an operator. We need somebody trained that sits by the little control area. So, do we have any volunteers?
I'm not nominating anybody.
I'll do it. It's okay.
But it was exciting, and you can actually see how this would work for us. I was really impressed by it. I think the Sagaponic did this a good favor by demonstrating their setup.
Our thanks to them and
Yeah.
thanks to you. The next report, Bob Plum, I guess teamed with Ed Hay on affordable housing, and then we'll get to the other elements.
So, well, the big news this week was that the governor signed a Community Housing Act in the state of New York, which allows municipalities to pass a 0.5% tax by referendum to be used for affordable housing. So I'm assuming when that law is actually passed, then there's a referendum, and that'll be another source of funding from within the village. Generally speaking, Ed and I have kind of realized is that the village itself, the village of Sag Harbor itself, doesn't really have like parking. We don't have a lot of extra real estate for big affordable housing. There's a few, and there are a couple potentially out there. So the East Hampton Town and Southampton Town have offices of affordable housing. So we're working with them. There are a number of projects in the pipeline. A number of people have come to visit us about potentially they're interested in doing projects. On the East Hampton side, where they own 2 lots, right down at 114, just outside the village, There's an election in November, so apparently that's sort of on hold until that goes through. But there are a number in Southampton town that are actively being looked at. And there are various complicated, where I can't explain them, complicated ways of how these are financed. Some are state funded, some are state subsidized, some are rentals, some are purchases. Kind of each deal is a separate.
Essentially, what we've been fielding is proposals and ideas from a variety of the public and private persons, entities. And they're looking for public-private partnerships to further our affordable housing initiative. So it's not strictly a municipal initiative, but certainly every municipality, the village, the towns could and hopefully would take parts in that. But there are a number of private people and entities interested in and have proposed different ideas that would help finance those private, those affordable housing initiatives as well. Each one is very complicated. Each one requires a certain amount of tax and or creative financing. And so as we are working our way through those and digging deeper and deeper and deeper into those, we'll get greater clarity on which ones are the best proposals for us to pursue over the next several months.
One thing I'd just like to remind everyone that accessory apartments are still legal in the village of Sag Harbor. It's on the books, and there haven't been too many granted, like none that I know of recently, but that doesn't mean there couldn't be. So we're looking into, I know one person who had applied for one, and it was sort of a long, complicated process, whatever. So we're trying to potentially streamline that, and now it's $5,000 fee. Maybe we could waive that or somehow work that out. There are fire code and safety issues that go with it, of course, but nevertheless, it still is on the books. You can still do that if you have the right situation. And the other thing that's still on the books is the requisite for multiple dwellings for affordable housing. I think it's 10%. I forget, there's a percentage. In lieu of that, you have to pay $186,000 per unit that you don't provide. Now, whether that's a reality in Sag Harbor, someone would propose something like that, I don't know. I think it's a little unlikely, but not necessarily. But just so we know that those are actively on the books, and that's where the Sag Harbor Community Housing Trust, who've been at this now for 15 years, we're working with them, and that's where all their funds have come from, primarily from the watch case factory. And so we're trying not to like get in each other's way. We're trying to, pick the projects and see which ones we can that we can help along in any way we can. It's a national issue. It's not just here. It's not just, it's everywhere.
Global.
Yeah, actually it is global. And so anyway, it's a big chunk. I mean, but there are a lot of people who've been working at it for a while, and those we're trying to, as I said, we're just trying to, rather than relearn that, learn it from them, and then we'll take it from there. That's where we are at this point.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Nash Park?
Yes, so Nash Park and the Sag Harbor School District are very much engaged in a capital planning process together. And I'm participating in that with them. I'm blessed to do so. We're meeting every week, standing meeting every Wednesday. There's been walkthroughs of the park by the school representatives of the committee. We've spoken with architects, everything from landscape architects to building architects, engineers. The idea is that the park and the school will scope a series of capital improvements of almost the entire park. Everything from fields, existing fields could be re-scraped and rebuilt. New fields could be added, but all with the concept of keeping the feel and look of the park as it exists as well. Both sides completely agree on the objective, which is to improve the playing facilities, the athletic facilities of the park, at the same time keeping the look and feel of the park. It will take some time to work through this planning process, there's no doubt. Like I said, both sides are meeting every week to identify scope, lay out the procedural hurdles they'll have to overcome to bring this to fruition. It will take some time, but both are enthusiastically working for it, and members of the community are enthusiastically supporting it as well. And I think that, I'm encouraged to see what's going on, because it could involve, both brand new fields in many cases, additional fields, new structures, frankly, as well, that fit into the existing structures to house the equipment that will be needed to maintain the fields that are being rebuilt, refurbished, or added. And would allow for a funding program through the school as well that would be voted on by this community to maintain this park in a way that's for the betterment of the entire community for the longer term. So this capital planning process should serve this community for years to come, if not decades to come. But this will all come from the park board and the school board in due course as more and more work is completed and more planning is done, and that can be shared and opined upon by the public as well. It's honestly for me a very encouraging process to participate in and see how well both sides are working and how easily they've come together with a shared vision of what's best for the community.
Thank you, Ed. That completes the departmental reports, and we'll move on to public comment period for the next 15 minutes. If you have public comment and you want to make specifically to the reports, we'll have another session later, and of course on the introductions, we'll invite some comment. But are there any comments on any of the reports?
Ready to use this?
Sure.
Is it on? Is it now on?
No, I don't think so.
I have a loud voice anyhow. Let's get that now to Barry, the Waterfront. Interestingly, I just want to say, a couple of the things I wanted to speak about, thank you, have been covered by the reports that were on my mind earlier. For the working towards the Zoom thing. There are a number of us who like to participate in government. We want government people participating. And I know that some of us should not be driving at night in the dark. And some of us need to move around more than sitting for 2 or 3 hours. There are all sorts of reasons. I beg you, the money is minor in relation to having open government. That's one thing on my mind. The parking fees you're going to be covering, I have that written down. I'm curious about the building department. Have we been issuing new permits for building? We haven't covered that one.
Well, the building department is in fresh hands. There's been some reorganization. They're working very hard to catch up the backlog that developed over COVID in recent months. And the answer specifically to your question is yes, they're in business and they are catching up.
And there have been some, in spite of areas that aren't in the waterfront overlay, there have been or not been any permits issued, you know?
There is, I'm sorry, I don't have those numbers here, but there have been permits issued. We recall that we have a new building inspector, a very seasoned fellow, and we have a new chair in both of the departments that was directly affected. And they both report a resumption of a higher level of activity, and they are issuing permits.
Okay, thank you. And I want to thank the board for the TCOs over the summer. It is an enormous help on Main Street. They really do a good job. They're young yet, but anyhow, it's a great help. They congregate a little bit together too. And yeah, thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and the board. I have a letter.
Just identify if we know you.
I'm
but-
sorry, my name is Emma Hamilton. I have a letter from over 200 residents of the Glover Street, Redwood Community, Green Street, Main Street, John Street, Bluff Point, Ferry Road, and other areas relative to action item 11.1 this evening, which will be voted on tonight, the authorization for Verizon Wireless to install or replace a temporary cellular facility at 23 Redwood Road. Thank you. Oh, that's so much. I'm requesting permission to read that letter now in advance of the vote, as opposed to waiting until after the vote has been made.
Well, we will call the item, and that would be the appropriate time. But that, you would have a chance to do it in advance of that.
In advance of the vote?
Yes,
Okay.
because the purpose of calling them individually is to invite comment during that discussion. So yes, but if you're up, if you want to read it now, that's fine.
Which would you prefer?
I would prefer you do it when we take up the item.
That's fine. I'll come back.
Okay, we know where you're sitting.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Anyone else? All right, we close that, the public comment period and go to,
James Cavoni.
oh, I'm sorry, Gabe, I'm sorry.
Hey, my name's Gabe Shivoli. Probably everybody around you knows me, because I lived here all my life. But anyhow, I know you do. Can you put the mic on?
It's on.
Just take, hold it up.
Put it to your mouth.
All right, Eddie, you sure this is the best way to go for the park?
I believe so, yes.
You know, we got 120 acres here. We need more than two guys to maintain this mother.
I think that, to be honest with you, I think that's part of the plan. What will it take to maintain that as well? Once capital improvements are completed. That's part of the overall planning that they're doing now for the park.
Okay? Just want to share that. I'll go along with it. I wanted to make another suggestion. We made this 25 years ago with, as far as this waterfront overlay. My personal opinion is, and you're not gonna like it, but I think we should have a waterfront zone, and it should be nothing but marinas and parks. And if it isn't a marina or a park, it doesn't apply. Done. And it should run from Havens Beach to the Redwood Marina.
Thank you for that, Gabe. We will be introducing very shortly the plan, and I think that's an appropriate place to comment, but I hear you.
You know,
I
as I
appreciate that.
said, we tried to do this 25 years ago. No deal, you know? Then they didn't have the nerve to do it then, and we'll see.
Thank you, sir.
This is a letter in response to a previous letter that the Harbor Committee submitted to you folks. So we thought it would be appropriate to have a grievance letter in regards to Havens Beach, what's been going on with the sewage issues there.
All right.
Okay. Will Sharp, I'm a member of the Harbor Committee. Wilson. Regarding the proposed upgrade to Havens Beach Comfort Station, we offer the following. And this is basically our position paper. It's following the previous position paper. Havens Beach has been selected as one of the 60 sites to receive a septic upgrade using CPF monies. McLean Engineering was selected by East Hampton Town Technical Advisory Committee and has designed two solutions for the upgrade utilizing current IA design criteria. Estimated cost for each system is in excess of $200,000. Both proposals assume a 100-car baseline. This is a minimum that the Suffolk County requires for all commercial applications. Using this criteria, it produces a mechanical and leaching field footprint in excess of 2,000 square feet. This baseline is contrary to entry signage at Havens Beach, which states use not to exceed 75 people. or cars. We're not clear what that sign really refers to. Regardless, we feel that the McLean solutions are disproportionate to actual use of the comfort station. Please recall that Havens Beach Comfort Station is used approximately 4 months per year and consumes less than 20,000 gallons of water per year, which includes irrigation and showering. As background, much has been made of the fecal coliform bacteria in the water at Havens. It is, however, important to remember that microbial source tracking done with last year's samples by the Gobler lab pointed to dogs and small mammals as a key source of the contamination. Relatively small amounts were attributed to humans. Therefore, the comfort station is not a significant source of pathogenic pollution at Havens. It is a source of nitrogen pollution, and nitrogen pollution is shown to be a major problem in the Peconic estuary. This alone is good reason to improve the comfort station. So we're asking that before you approve a septic system upgrade at Havens Beach, we would appreciate the opportunity to explore further alternatives to the present 100-car baseline plans with the objective of reducing the overall disruption and footprint of the proposed IA system. One approach worth investigating is the experimental system being installed at South Haven Park by the Center for Clean Water Technology, of which Dr. Golder is the director. There's a similar system, which we just discovered, which is also proposed for Mashash and Lewitt Park. This system might help reduce the disruption in the cost of the CPF and the cost to the CPF, as the cost would likely be under $50,000. This plan being constructed now will be 880 square feet, whereas the proposed plans at Havens are over 2,000 square feet. Another approach is to request a variance from the Suffolk County Department of Health explaining the use of the comfort station as de minimis, and a more realistic baseline assumption as to actual usage would produce a smaller, more appropriate size IA system. Variances are not difficult to get with proper documentation. We appreciate the need for upgrading septic systems in Sag Harbor, including the one at Havens Beach, and hope that together we can find an appropriate solution to Havens Beach. All of which is saying that we reviewed two in-depth shovel-ready systems that are ready to be approved by Suffolk County. And we are hoping that before you approve those, we pursue further investigation. If there's something that's going on in national that's appropriate, a smaller footprint and a smaller cost.
Thank you, Mr. Sharp. I'm sorry.
Who wants this?
Nancy Achenbach. I'm concerned about the sidewalks. I really appreciate the roads getting done, but there are so many sidewalks that are, I'm amazed that you haven't been sued, especially in front of the Historical Society. And I've written several letters to the village regarding that. Is there anything in the budget where?
Well, yeah, there's been, I don't have any figures here tonight, but the repair and upgrading of sections of sidewalk is a continuing year-round undertaking. So yes, there is money in the budget. I'm not sure where we are in the
It's
budget here.
it's lagging greatly. I've seen nothing done. Anyway.
Well, I wouldn't say nothing
I
done.
haven't seen it.
Well, okay.
Okay.
I'd be happy to give you a report next meeting on what's been done so far.
That's okay. I just wanted to bring it to the attention of everyone.
Thank you.
We're all aware of it, Nancy.
Yeah.
And I've been speaking up about it multiple
No, I
times
know
because
you're
I
aware.
go and help the people that fall down. And I actually tripped over a similar spot that I had just helped somebody hours later.
I'm
So-
praying you won't have to come to the Historical
I mean,
Society.
it's definitely a problem and it needs to be addressed.
We have $30,000 a year in our repair budget, and I understand from Pete that last year we didn't get a lot of repairs done because of COVID, but a lot of work is beginning right now. Part of paid parking was to be ring fence to help with the transportation infrastructure, and the best way you can transport yourself around this town is by walking. So I would hope that as we work our way through that, that we can find some more money for
pavements, new ones and repairs.
Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Trustees. I'm Duncan Darrow, with founder, chairman of Fighting Chance. We're a cancer care organization. Is this working? Well, yes, better, yes. My name's Duncan Darrow. I'm with Fighting Chance. We're a cancer care organization based in Sag Harbor on Bay Street. Been here for 19 years, probably navigated close to 1,000 Sag Harbor residents through the cancer journey, emotional support, logistics. We had provided, Mr. Mayor, a letter to you on September 24, asking that we be put on this agenda to obtain an approval. And unless I could be blind, but I'm looking at, for example, another nonprofit, I Try, as item 23, seeking approval for an event. We're seeking for approval for something next May, which seems like a long ways away, but it's not when you consider logistics, obtaining sponsors and such. I'm just wondering if you'd be kind enough to add a 23A, which is to say an additional item to the agenda, because we had submitted, the permits and everything that was required.
Thank you, Duncan. My apology. We were working through concerns raised by the chief of police and the harbor master, and which I don't believe are resolved at this point, which is why it's not on the agenda. Why don't you and I get together in the next day or so? We'll talk about that. My apology. Is this on one of these matters?
Yes.
Change order. If you're doing repairs, the handicap spaces on the west side of Main Street are not good. First of all, in front of the movie theater, you're right on the crosswalk. And thank God for the young men this summer, because they would help myself or anyone else to get out of the parking place, because you couldn't see people in the crosswalk. I suggested to the previous administration that those 30-minute parking spaces that you have right next to it, take half of them, then you can have a real handicap parking space where someone can open their door. Because part of the problem is trying to get out of the car, and there's not enough space to open the door all the way. Then you'd have a half a parking place, which perhaps you could have people with motorcycles park. And to have the parking places handicap on the east side of Main Street are all on an end so that you can open the door and you can get out. At the west side of Main Street, I wish you would take a look at them. Every one of them is not a real handicap parking space. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll certainly take a look. Anyone else? All right, now we will close the public comment period and go to introductions. The first item is the annual Suffolk County Community Development Citizen Ideas Wanted campaign. This is where we participate in a process for public involvement that is operated by the county with your motion to support item number 7.1.
Make a motion.
Brunel, is there a second? And hey, any discussion? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The matter is agreed to. Next up is a local law amending chapter 300 zoning to include a new article 15 to establish zoning regulations to govern development within a newly created waterfront zoning overlay district, and to amend the zoning map for the village to establish the new boundaries of that overlay district. Just to set it up procedurally, there was an earlier version introduced at the August meeting. That public hearing process has been open since then, and this is coming forward as amendments to that. So that is a continuation of that process, but with a fresher draft, which is what is being introduced here tonight. So to get this going, I would invite a motion on item number 7.2, local law amending chapter 300.
I'll make a motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
The matter is agreed to, and the matter is before us. Do we need a separate motion for the hearing?
You would be setting, yeah, you would be introducing it and setting, it's in the introduction, sets a public hearing for November 9th.
Okay,
So that's part of the introduction.
okay. So there are two related matters. And that is the next item, number 7.3, which is a local law amending 300 to establish specific variance standards under section B for non-conforming uses, buildings, structures, and lots. And the further item, local law to change the zoning classification for the Steinbach Park to reflect its role in the modern era as part of parks and conservation zoning. So would hear motions to open each of those three items as well.
I'll make a motion on both.
Mr. Mayor, do we want to announce that the text of the zoning will be on the website?
Yes, the text of the introduction tonight will be on the website either later tonight or first thing tomorrow. So you all know we do have a website and there it'll be. All right. So
I need a separate motion on each law. So the next law that will still need a motion on is number 3.
I'll make a motion on number 3.
I'll second that.
all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The matter is agreed to. And would invite a motion on item number 4.
I'll make a motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Nay. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So we are now in status of having opened public hearing on the floor.
No, we haven't. We have to notice the public hearings for November 9th. They'll be noticed in the paper, they'll be put on the website, and they'll be opening the public hearing for November 9th. But we're here to introduce the local laws to the public.
I'm sorry, I didn't explain that very well, but that's, I think, well explained now. So these are open, and we can take comments.
No, well, if you can provide comment tonight, but the formal public hearing comment period starts for these local laws on November 9th, at the November 9th meeting. So you may want to reserve your comment tonight until you've had time to digest the law and then come back and make comments at the November 9th meeting. And then it'll be open for public comment. But tonight, we can certainly introduce the law to the public, and that's what Kathy's going to start with, the study, and then I'll go through the law for the board and the public.
And the study will also be on the website.
Yes,
Okay.
by tomorrow morning.
Thank you. The study will have-
Not tonight.
Thank you.
All right, so with that, with those introductions in place, the team of Vale and Eisman will take over. Name of a future powerful firm, I'm sure.
I'll start. So we've been here before. I'm sure that many of you recognize me from the Zoom meetings that we had, but not in person. We have put together a study, the Waterfront Planning Study. Does this help? Does it help?
Yes.
Okay. Closer? Okay. So we put together a planning study, and one thing that I'd just like to say is that the vision for the waterfront area hasn't changed, but there's very many ways to achieve the same goals. And so the law that was introduced back in June, I guess, for a July public hearing is different than what will be introduced tonight. But we put together the planning study that established the vision for the waterfront area. And it went through the zoning code and identified those pieces of the code that don't meet the vision for the waterfront area. So those include the visual access, which was something that was deemed very important, public access to the waterfront, non-conforming uses, again, something in the waterfront area that is most important is to make sure that the development is charming and meets those goals for that historic feel that everyone loves in Sag Harbor Village and isn't overdeveloped, and doesn't take away from the quality of development of the waterfront. So the other thing that came out of the prior work that we did was that apartment uses and condominiums on the waterfront, actual waterfront parcels and facing waterfront parks as well, would not be permitted, even though they'd still be permitted as special exception uses in the office district and in the BB on upper floors. And then finally, site development standards, enhanced site development standards. These are all things that were positive things that came out of the code that was presented back in June. And I'm not sure if I have the date right. I think it was, the public hearing was supposed to be June 13th, so, July 13th, sorry. So out of this study, we have several recommendations. One is to adopt a waterfront overlay district. Liz will go into the details of the provisions of that code. And again, that will be on the website tomorrow morning. Another is to talk about the things that came up during the course of this study. Parking is one. We recommend that the village revisit a parking study. They had done a study in the past. It's something that's been looked at intensively over the years in different ways. And there are different ways to manage parking. The parking requirements that are in the code now are very much more for a suburban commercial center. And that is something that's where we started. The planning board and the zoning board both felt that that was the core metric for development in the waterfront area. But unfortunately, you can't have one set of standards for parking on a waterfront area when right behind that is commercial property has the same constraints and the same, what's the word? Hardships, what's the word? Problems, yeah, exactly, exactly. They're in the same boat, one side of the road, the other side of the road. Everybody has the same issues with, thank you. Senior moments. Having a different parking requirement for one side of the road doesn't make any sense. So it needs to be reevaluated on a village-wide basis. The other tool that came up that actually was something that was removed from the code was the ability for the zoning board to require a payment in lieu of parking. The zoning board is often asked for parking relief, and there is nothing at this time, no mitigation. It's just if they get a parking variance, then that's it. There's no payment in lieu. That came out of the code sometime between 2009, 2010. So reinstituting that would allow to have at least some kind of payment in lieu of parking that could be used for purchase of property parking. And we all know that that's very expensive, but you can set the cost of a parking space in lieu of parking based on the area and an appraisal of a piece of property. You can say, okay, what would a parking space cost to actually purchase it? Anybody have ones for sale? Anyway, so we are recommending that the village consider reinstituting that payment in lieu of parking. The third recommendation has to do with the Cor Maria property. That is a very important piece on the waterfront, and it's something that has been in many of the planning documents over the years, including the LWRP from way back when. And it's something that comes up every time we talk about the waterfront. It's 16 acres, a little over 16 acres. It's zoned for R20, meaning 20,000 square foot lots, which is 2 lots per acre. So 30 odd houses there. But it is a national, it's a landmark. It's a designated landmark. The property is a landmark. It's an important piece of property along the waterfront. So we're recommending that a separate look at that, that you take a separate look at that to focus on what the future of that property should be if it were to be redeveloped. How do we protect the important aspects that Cor Maria provides? All right, finally, I have to take a sip of water. I'm so sorry. My mother always told me I talk too fast. 3 more to go. Affordable housing is another thing that came up many times during the discussion of the waterfront area. And that is something that's a village-wide problem, and we are recommending that work be continued. Some of the things that you said tonight were great because the R20 zoning district, your residential district, you're allowed to have an accessory apartment, but it's very difficult. It has to be in the same house. It has to be within the house. It can't be in the basement. It can't be in a cottage house like in Southampton town. You can have a little cottage in the back. So there's a lot of ways that you can provide more affordable housing that's not necessarily regulated affordable housing. There's also apartment buildings in the office district, which permit affordable apartment buildings, but you have to have affordable units unless you put money into the trust. So again, we're recommending that the village look into removing obstacles and incentivizing affordable housing and do it on a village-wide basis. It's not something we could have done in this waterfront overlay on its own. But there may be properties within that area, waterfront area, that would be appropriate though. Strengthening the non-conforming language. Right now, if you have a non-conforming use, a pre-existing non-conforming use, which means that it's not allowed in the underlying zoning district, you're allowed to continue it, that use. There is a provision in the code that was taken out in recent years that limited the expansion of pre-existing non-conforming uses. That really should go back in. There's no reason, you should really limit the size of expanding non-conforming uses for a lot of reasons. And then even just strengthening the criteria for approving pre-existing non-conforming use by the zoning board. And then finally, amending the zoning of Steinbach Park. Portion of that park, as you know, was privately owned. It's in the office district now, not that it would ever be developed as an office or the uses, but it's more appropriate to have that as parks and conservation. Right. And now over to you, Liz.
I probably did an even worse job than I think I did on introducing this, but understand that all of the work that gets done in zoning and what we might address in an overlay code must be underpinned by a policy study, which is what Kathy has just presented or summarized for you. You notice that some of those are matters of recommendation. What Liz will now do is talk about what we have carried into the draft before you. And these are all good, solid recommendations. Some may already be in what we've drafted. Some may be considered as we go forward. Others may not, in our judgment, fit in this particular context. We notice that there are 4 introductions. Some of the matters we've looked at already are the subject of a companion or separate matter. So if we haven't confused you enough, I'll turn it over to Liz to straighten out all of this confusion I've created.
Good evening, everyone. Liz Vale. I'm here tonight in my capacity as village attorney. Good evening, board members. I'm going to try and keep this close to me so you can hear me. So the first local law that we've handed out tonight is an amendment of the zoning code to create a waterfront overlay district, a waterfront zoning overlay district, to amend the zoning map for the village of Sag Harbor, establish the boundaries of that district, and enact regulations to govern development in the waterfront overlay district area. So after considering feedback regarding the form-based code from members of the public, involved agencies, including the Suffolk County Planning Commission, the village planning consultant, the board reconsidered the proposed form-based code, and after study expanded the proposed overlay district area to include more of the actual coastline of the Sag Harbor waterfront. So that's the first thing that's changed from the prior laws, that this proposed waterfront overlay district area is larger and encompasses more of the actual contiguous coastline of Sag Harbor Village. Secondly, based upon its review, the board also amended the draft code to eliminate the proposed building forms that were specified architectural detailed forms proposed in the form-based code in favor of amending the existing zoning code in its existing format and create new zoning regulations for the waterfront overlay district. So you may remember the former form-based code actually had proposed building forms that you were supposed to emulate and had a lot of specific architectural detail in connection with those proposed forms. And so we're moving away from those proposed forms. And the reason is we sought to retain those portions of the form-based code that was studied that satisfied the intent of the law to examine new strategies for guiding the future growth of the village within the study area while protecting the existing character of the village, the remaining public water vistas, and groundwater and natural resources. So that was the intent of moving away from the form-based code to get away from those specified forms and embrace the actual existing eclectic, unique character of the village of Sag Harbor and its architecture. So specifically, the first, if you look at the proposed local law, the first section we amend, we have, of course, a lengthy legislative intent. And then thereafter, we amend section 300-3.1 of the zoning code to establish the waterfront overlay district and add it as a third overlay district in your code. Then we suggest another waterfront overlay district intent that actually gets part of the legislation that gets added to the code. And then we start into the actual overlay district standards. So first, this law will apply to all of the lands that are in the proposed zoning map amendments. That's the name of the map that was created by Nelson Pope Voorhees. It's dated October 8th, 2021, and it's included in the packets that are being handed out. It will be included in the website as well. So you can see the new coastal area of the waterfront overlay district area. And that's what this law will apply to. The second is the definition of waterfront in the waterfront overlay district. This is very important. It's taken from the prior law, a lot that the waterfront lot.
I'm sorry, but
Sure.
could you point out which article or section that you're?
So I I've had this problem before where I go too fast, I apologize. I'm on page 5, section C at the bottom. Definition of waterfront in the waterfront overlay district.
Liz, can I ask you to back up a little bit?
Sure.
Because, to cover what you already covered after the legislative intent.
Sure. Do you want me to start where? After the intent?
After the intent.
Sure, I'm just saying where, you have to look at the actual overlay district map to see what lands this actually applies to. And that's being codified and you have to refer to the map. That's in section A under 300-15.3 waterfront overlay district standards. Section B addresses an interpretation or conflict with other laws. And it just talks about the more restrictive section of the law will apply if there's ever a question. Section C, again, is the definition of a waterfront lot in the waterfront overlay district. And it's defined as a lot that abuts a water body or a lot that abuts a park that abuts a water body as set forth in the diagram below. On the next page, you can see the diagram that's taken from the prior form-based code, just to.
Liz, I'm sorry, but for the public, we're on page 6 now.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes,
there are.
I only brought 10 with me.
What?
I didn't bring enough.
Okay, so I'll try and go slow. If there aren't copies, there's going to be copies put on the website tomorrow. You will have more than a month. You will have more than a month to actually review the law and provide comments at the next public hearing, which will be November 9th. So just for purposes, and of course, you can always call me and ask me any questions you have if you read it and don't understand it. So I'm just basically reviewing the provisions in the law and specifically the ones that we also took from the prior law. So that was the definition of waterfront lot, which is important. And that's why I'm emphasizing it. The next section is a waterfront overlay district standard regarding the height of structures in the waterfront overlay district. So the proposed permitted height will be 25 feet as measured from the street or lowest grade on site, whichever is less, with a maximum of 2 stories. Third stories with a maximum height of 35 feet may be permitted on waterfront properties in the OD and VB zoning district within the waterfront overlay district as set forth in a subsequent code section, Village Code section 300-11.23 D10 for structures over 3,500 square feet and gross floor area that requires special exception permit from the Village Board of Trustees. And we'll review that in depth later. The permitted height of structures that are not waterfront properties in the waterfront overlay district shall be governed by the underlying zoning district regulations for that property as set forth in Village Code section 300 attachment 2, table of dimensional regulations. To the extent a third story is permitted as set forth in section 2 above, a third story step back or front, corner, and side facades shall be created at a minimum of 10 feet. The next section regards setbacks. This is taken from the former code as well. On waterfront properties located in the overlay district, the required waterfront yard setback for principal structures shall be a minimum of 30 feet from the mean high water line. The next section addresses accessory structures in the overlay district. And they must meet the following dimensional requirements: front yard setback, minimum of 20 feet, side and rear yard setback, minimum of 5 feet, maximum height in stories is 1 story or 15 feet. Distance between buildings is a minimum of 15 feet, and accessory structures are not permitted in view corridors or public access easements. The next section is the waterfront visual access. Again, this section was also taken from the prior code. You may be familiar with it. It's a provision requiring open view sheds at ground level to provide a water view from public streets and surrounding properties. The provision of visual access yards shall be provided on all properties fronting the waterfront or waterfront parks. The minimum visual access yard shall be 20% of the property width, but no less than 15 feet in width for any individual lot. It shall not be obstructed with any visual barriers. The next section is floodproofing. For buildings within a flood zone, dry floodproofing on the ground floor and maintenance of existing grade is required in lieu of raising the ground floor elevation pursuant to FEMA. The next section addresses mechanical equipment. It requires that mechanical equipment is fully screened. We then move on at the bottom of 7 to refuse areas. This also requires fully enclosed buildings or outdoor areas to be enclosed by walls or opaque fencing to hide refuse areas. Section K addresses residential uses. It states no residential uses shall be permitted on waterfront properties within the BB or OD districts and the waterfront overlay district. And finally, all development shall comply with the Suffolk County Sanitary Code in Chapter 220 sewers of the Village Code, where an extension of sewer service area or new connection is required. All costs shall be the responsibility of the applicant. So then we go on to the next section, which is at the top of page 8. This is another amendment of the code. This is amending the special exception permit standards of the code. Right now, the delegation of authority in the code is essentially to the planning board. However, there is an existing village board review of proposed cell towers. So any special exception permit for cell towers does go to the village board of trustees for review and approval. It's already in the code. So we're now creating a new review and approval by the Village Board of Trustees for uses or structures greater than 3,500 square feet of gross floor area in the waterfront overlay district. So these are new standards that an application for a use or structure greater than 3,500 square feet would have to meet in order to get a permit for the approval of that particular use or structure in the waterfront overlay district. And again, it's reviewed by the Village Board of Trustees. The first standard is that it just establishes that the Village Board of Trustees is authorized to review the special exception use permit application. And it also states that single-family residential dwellings, accessory structures, and uses located in R20 are excluded from this special permit review. The section shall also apply to a group of buildings or structures on one or more lots in common ownership or control with a gross floor area greater than 3,500 square feet in the aggregate. So it applies to not just a single application, but if someone owns or controls multiple properties that adds up to 3,500 square feet or more, it comes under this review. C, the application shall comply with the general standards. There are a number of general standards already in Village Code section 300-11.3, which are applied to all special exception permits. And the application must meet those standards as well. D, the Village Board of Trustees shall determine whether the proposed use is consistent with the Village Comprehensive Plan, the Waterfront Overlay District standards, and whether it will have an undue adverse impact on other properties or current uses within the Waterfront Overlay District and community. And in making this determination, the Village Board shall consider and apply the following standards. 1, whether the proposed use and design is consistent with the goals, spirit, and intent of 300-15.1, the Waterfront Overlay District Code. 2, whether the design, scale, and appearance of the buildings on site are compatible with each other and with the neighborhood, adjacent properties, and the Waterfront Overlay District, including consideration of materials used, roof pitch, variation of roof lines, facade, arrangement of windows and doors, and architectural style and details. 3, the applicant demonstrates a need for the building complex larger than 3,500 square feet. 4, the size of the subject property can accommodate the proposed building and use. 5 addresses traffic. They'll be required to submit a traffic impact analysis and study, which determines that the existing roadway and network of the proposed development will be able to handle the existing through traffic and additional traffic that the development will generate. 6, whether adequate parking is provided on site and screened from adjacent residential or other properties. A parking plan shall be provided, and such plan shall be made as unobtrusive as possible by incorporating landscaping, etc. 7, whether buildings, site designs, and on-site activities are consistent with the noise code. 8, whether the design includes transitional side and rear buffers. 9, principal structures shall be set back 25 feet from any rear property line or a minimum of 5 feet from the required transition yards and buffers, whichever is greater. 10, the maximum height of structures in the waterfront overlay district shall be governed by Village Code Section 300-15.3D, except that for a waterfront property over 3,500 square feet in gross floor area in the VB or OD zoning district within the waterfront overlay district, the Village Board of Trustees may, where appropriate, permit an increase in height to 3 stories or 35 feet, conditioned upon the applicant providing a construction of a permanent accessible pedestrian walkway at a minimum of 10 feet in width for public use, providing public access to the waterfront. The board may consider a proposed public access along the waterfront side of the property, provided there is already access leading to it. The proposed public access shall mitigate the impacts of allowing an increase in height of structures on the waterfront. The walkway shall be made available for public use pursuant to an easement agreement between the village and the property owner and shall be recorded in the Suffolk County Clerk's office. 11, wherever practical, the primary structure on the lot shall have its main entrance facing the principal street in which it's located. 12, signs should be the sign code of the village code. 13, a waste management plan shall be submitted. And then Section 5, we're going to amend the actual zoning map to add the waterfront overlay district as referenced on the proposed zoning map amendments dated October 8th, 2021 by Nelson Pope Voorhees. That's a basic outline of the guidelines and regulations proposed in connection with the waterfront overlay district code. There are 2 companion, well, you want to speak, sir?
Yeah, let me just check.
Okay.
I'll give Liz a moment to catch her breath. That's a lot to digest. There'll be no quiz tonight. I would offer that between now and the November meeting during this public preparation for the public hearing, we would be perfectly pleased to have a work session exclusively on this and the other introductions that we're making tonight. The key points are being covered. The record is being made that this has been put before you. This is an introduction only. There's no substantive action to be taken tonight. The next couple of items are matters that were considered in this context, but are either as a matter of practical consideration or as a matter of just the way that the law is structured, the code is structured to be the subject of companion or separate introductions.
So the next local law that I'll address is actually the local law to change the zoning classification for the Giant Steinbach Waterfront Park from office district to parks and conservation zoning. Right now, the park is currently designated office district zoning, and certainly during the study and work conducted by Nelson Pope Voorhees, they recommended that the park actually be rezoned to parks and conservation zoning, which would be more consistent with the actual permitted uses on site. As you all know, it was purchased by the town of Southampton with the Community Preservation Fund, which is restricted by New York State Town Law 64E, and it restricts the uses to conservation of parks. So this zoning amendment will just make the code consistent with the permitted uses on that property. And that's what this local law will do. And it's also tied to the same map, which on that waterfront overlay district zoning map shows a nice green hatched area, proposed zone change for that property. So that's the next law. The final local law proposed in connection with this study that came out of this study is a reintroduction of Village Code Section 300-12.6, which 12.6B, specific variance standards. So back in January of 2020, the village board found that this code provision was not uniformly applied to variance applications for non-conforming buildings and uses. And they they removed it from the code. They actually removed this section from the code. We're recommending that it be reintroduced to the code and recodified. It's a section that affects pre-existing non-conforming uses, buildings, and structures. And it allows specific variance standards for the Zoning Board of Appeals to apply to applicants who are trying to increase or enlarge pre-existing non-conforming uses and structures in the village. Basically, in the case of a non-conforming use or structure, it limits the expansion to 50% of the gross floor area of such building or structure actually devoted to that non-conforming use or to the floor area of such building or structure existing as of the effective date of the building or structure or use having become non-conforming. And you have to meet other standards as well with regard to parking. There shall be no change in the nature or character of the use, and the lot coverage and density shall not be greater than what would have been permitted by the most restrictive lot coverage and density provisions in the code. So we're reintroducing this and this would be village-wide. This would not be just in the waterfront overlay district. This would be to limit the expansion of pre-existing non-conforming uses and structures in the village to 50% by the Zoning Board of Appeals. And it applies to residential as well as commercial, to all pre-existing non-conforming uses and structures in the village. And that's the final code amendment proposed.
Thank you, Liz, and thank you, Kathy. So what we have here is the introduction and the continuation of a process, but in effect, restarting the process on a different set of proposals. And we're happy to take questions on what we've presented, but this is not the night for advocacy. It is basically to get this process started, to put it before you. My apology, there are more of you than we prepared for. And this is all available online, and we will have copies, for those who prefer paper copies, available at the desk in Village Hall starting tomorrow, including the map. The perspective that I see in what we're doing, first of all, was I never quite understood the choices made in the first round for treating only half the waterfront. Recalling that the eastern boundary started at the end of the shipyard and the western boundary only at the beacon. So the first thing we've done here is in the new mapping is to pick up the virtually all of the commercial waterfront, the linear waterfront into this effort to get better controls, better protections in place where so much of this commercial district sitting on our biggest asset, the waterfront, would be the subject of a specialized zoning effort, a specialized context. And so that's the reason we've now broadened the boundaries to include those additional properties. So it really goes from the east side of Cor Maria all the way to the west side of the commercial properties on the Redwood Causeway. Now, the focal point of this from the very first study, for our very first introduction, has had to do with commercial properties. But inevitably, there are some residential properties in that linear zone. Some are just caught up in it because of their particular location, but they're not the focus of this process. It's to focus and add protections and devices, tools, if you will, for the development that seems to be focused, potential development on the commercial waterfront. Cor Maria is obviously an exception based on its size and its attractiveness. And so it is in the fetch of this boundary and will be the subject of discussion, I am certain. The effort in the entire waterfront is to increase the capacity to protect and to preserve and to nourish what we have. And the tools that have been laid out here are first of all, inclusion of the larger district, which I always believe is appropriate. The second is to define an additional tool, and that is where the Board of Trustees on the larger properties will have quite a specific authority and process with very detailed standards, as you heard, for regulating the larger propositions. And I think that's a very important tool and a major part of what we're doing here, trying to do here. And the village did experiment with this very briefly a few years ago and withdrew the effort when we had failed to really create the standards that would go with the exercise of that kind of authority. And it is meant to be corrected in this draft in that the standards are very specific, very focused, so that when the Board of Trustees has the authorities that it has, it will be not subjective, but in accordance with a very specific code. People have asked, well, what about all the regular processes? All of the regular processes apply. The ZBA will still have whatever authority it has to deal with variances from the code. The ARB, to the extent we're dealing with historic properties and look and feel and all those things, will all continue to be the case. This is literally an overlay. These are additional protections, additional tools that we would seek to exercise to protect the waterfront going forward. The Steinbach Park thing was an anomaly because in all the work we did putting the first phase of it together, we never focused on the fact that the zoning had not been updated. So this is simply an update to reflect the reality. The 50% is a restoration of a process that I think worked reasonably well, and we're bringing it back as another tool. People have asked, well, what about affordable housing? Why aren't we mandating that for the village? Well, the simple answer to that is we can't. We don't have the authority to mandate a specific use. We can permit uses, we can incentivize uses, we can urge uses, we can participate in all of the devices that we have, but we cannot per se mandate affordable housing. You must build it and build it here. What we will bring forward in a companion effort is to create a more receptive and accessible process for affordable housing, but village-wide, not confined to the waterfront district. And that will be part of the work that goes forward. Putting all that together, I would like you to appreciate how much work has been put in by our staff, our consultants, our attorney, your trustees and your mayors. And I think we see an outcome here within reach, within the time zone that's available to us under the extended moratorium that was unanimously approved, I should say, by Suffolk County, recognizing the importance of what we're doing and the stakes that are involved. What I would invite now is questions on procedure. And if you want to identify specific factual questions in content that we haven't answered, we'll do that. But tonight is not the night for the public policy debate about this or the substantive or subjective concerns you may have. So with that, I would say the floor is open for questions. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. Elizabeth Gilbert. In terms of the Board of Trustees approving square footage exceeding 3,500 square feet, thank you. Is that a consensus or is that a majority?
I mean, the vote, you mean for us to authorize,
Yeah, is it gonna be done by consensus or by?
we haven't
majority?
set up this.
No, it's by law, it's by majority.
By law, but
That's how the village board of trustees acts on all matters, unless it's required to be a majority plus one under the law, in which case this isn't.
thank you.
This is on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Liz, that was breathless. Thank you, and thank you for the work that's gone into this. I have one question. My name is Jane Young.
We have closer.
Closer. Hold it close.
Is that better?
Yes.
My name is Jane Young. I'm a member of the Sag Harbor Partnership Board, and I was also a member of the Waterfront Committee and was a longstanding board member of Save Sag Harbor, but I'm no longer affiliated with them. But I've been involved with, I guess, 3 sets of code evolutions in the village, so that I have a little bit of, questions and a vested interest in outcome. I'm trying to understand the context of what you're putting forth. So we're taking away the form-based code concept, and we're working with the pre-existing code, but updating it specifically for waterfront area. Is that?
That's correct.
Thank you.
And drawing from the form-based proposal that's already been made, those parts that we felt had merit.
Had merit. Will there be a use chart, updated use chart?
No, I actually recommend against changing the uses. So the uses in the code are specifically in the code from a prior planning study. And to amend the uses under the in the underlying zoning districts, if you do not comply with what's considered the comprehensive plan of the village, you really require an in-depth environmental impact statement study under SECRA. So it's a much bigger review than what was being done, in my opinion, under the prior review. There was no GEIS done with respect to changes in uses that were proposed or considered by the prior committee. So I recommended against changing any of the uses in the code without that necessary study, since what they were proposing did not comply with the prior studies that were adopted by the village.
So if retail is allowed ultimately in the OD district, it will be the same retail limitations that we have on Main Street.
The
in terms of
uses
square
are,
footage.
yeah, the underlying uses in the zoning districts are not proposed to change.
And what about square footage?
What do you mean square footage?
Square footage of shops. And one of the things that we put through in 2008, 2009, when we did the, when Village did the commercial code, there were limits to square footage of stores to maintain the mom and pop shops, and that was a core.
That remains.
We haven't changed that at all.
So that will carry over, because one thing that we had done in the last year is we had lowered the square footage of shops to not compete, so that they would not compete with Main Street. And they would, but yet, because they were a smaller square footage, might invite other types of businesses, like a bicycle repair shop or a gelato shop, things that we couldn't have, or the shoemaker and the tailor that we all talk about, to make those, they would be smaller square footage, lower rents to attract the services.
That has
would
not
help.
changed. That has not changed.
Okay, so that's going to carry forward. Another question.
So yeah, the idea was that 800 square foot is the minimum, and the idea was that you could have micro shops. And that doesn't carry forward, and could be something that the board considers.
And that idea, the change, that relates to the changes of uses, which was in contravention of the 2008 planning study, which was very specific about maintaining the uses on Main Street and in the village business district.
Does change of size have the same requirements of the
Yeah, it has to
study
be
for the
studied.
change of use?
I think it has to be studied specifically, the potential impacts of that and how that would impact the entire
Village Business District, the areas outside of the waterfront overlay
So
district.
both sides and
Yeah.
use require a study.
Yeah.
Okay.
So is the OD part of the waterfront overlay, or is that, so it still is, okay? Another thing that I thought we had had good value was the idea of encouraging more affordable home ownership by limiting the square footage of homes and apartments and condos that could be put into that OD district as a way for it not to just become, you know, an extension of some of the super grand residences in the village, but a way to have a meaningful dwelling options, but that would serve more of a mix of the population.
Well, you can certainly propose that in a letter to the board. If
Okay.
you think that was missed after you reviewed the law.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just a couple of other quick things. I don't know, again, if this was in there or not, but again, one of the visual, we talked about the visual access. But we also talked about not allowing too great a linear foot of building along the waterfront, so that one, to establish the view sheds and the corridors, but also not to have massing. And so I don't know if it was 100 feet or 150 feet, Bob, you would know, or Aiden, but we did have a provision in there that, so we did not have these super long, you know, cruise ship size buildings going up without breaks. And then in the visual view sheds that were being created through, you know, through the construction, and they would be getting a height variance to create these, to put windows or other kind of architectural elements, so it wasn't dead space. Either, you know, benches, windows, trees, planting something.
Right.
Let me just see if there's anything else. Oh, and then I just thought it might be very helpful, because in the earlier version, when models were produced, it was really a great learning tool and a great thing that people could respond to and say, okay, now I get what a 10-foot setback is, what a 35-foot height is, how that's going to compare. So if there's some way in this process to prepare visual aids that would show some of the code in action, as it were. What do you think?
I hear you.
Okay.
It makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, so many of us are not architects and planners and such, that it was that it created a lot of aha moments when we had that. And the last thing that was in the use chart, these are, some of these are just things that I followed very closely, was we had 3 designations in the old use chart of prohibited, special exemption, and allowed. And there was great discussion about ferry service being designated either as special exemption or prohibited. And I think it went from prohibited, our recommendation was prohibited, and then I think after some discussion, it was moved over to special exemption. So I just wanted to
No, it's, no, this is what you're saying they proposed.
yeah, we had proposed this, and I just encouraged the village to look at ferry service and the waterfront and what would allow, because case in point was Montauk. And when
Jane, I need to ask you, I asked you not to.
okay, you don't want me to bring up, okay.
And these are the kind of
No,
matters
I'm
that
happy
we'd
to
like
do
to
it.
bring forward during the process we're beginning now.
Just remember ferry. Okay, anybody else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Robbie Stein, 7 Britson Road, Sag Harbor. Just a couple of questions of clarification. In terms of non-conforming, if something is given a variance, is that then non-conforming? In other words, if something was given a variance 10 years ago, someone buys the property.
Variance for what? I mean, you mean for
Size.
expansion?
Expansion.
Yeah, so no, it's 50% total from the day it became non-conforming. So if you've already gotten your 50%, that's it. If you-
Okay, so
yeah,
it's retroactive. in
Yeah.
that sense.
Yes,
Okay, and the other thing
that's how
is,
it's always been applied.
right, I didn't know if
Right.
it was changing. I didn't know if it was
No,
setting it
no,
where it
it's
was now.
it's not from today's date.
And the second thing is, in terms of environmental impact, you know, I think I heard you saying that in all districts that would be prioritized. It's hard to hear back there sometimes. So in other words, if you look at the waterfront district where it butts the office district by the back parking lot, where the pond was, which is now a parking lot, would the building in the office in the waterfront district be contingent on the impact environmentally?
Well, every application on its own will have a secret review, right? So
Right, but it's not an adjacent, that's what I'm really asking. In other words, the unique conditions of Sag Harbor
Right.
are that a lot of it is built with virtually a ground level, all Main Street, you know, virtually all Main Street, basement flood. The entire back parking lot, it's a flooding area. So I understand the visual and the architectural
Right.
rationale. I do think there needs to be an interface. And I was just trying to clarify if that was addressed. I thought you had said that, but I wasn't sure.
Robbie, I would agree that you can't have an environmental assessment of one big contiguous lot.
That's my, yeah. Like, I know when I was on the board, we were looking at the parking lot in the back, and because I'm not an engineer, you know, it had to be pointed out to me that the parking lot wasn't flooding because it only didn't rain there. It was actually coming from somewhere. So I don't think this village can look at a code without water, not just waterfront. And I think that is what needs to be at least considered. I'm not advocating, I'm just wondering if that was part of it. So I'll leave it with that.
Thank you, Raj.
Hello, Peter Ganay, 165 Division Street. I just wanted to ask when the new draft or amendments are posted, will they be called out so that we can compare what's in the current draft versus what's there, what was in the previous draft easily?
No, it's just as it's proposed to be codified.
Okay.
I'm not doing a special, this is what was proposed, this is what they're doing.
So we
You'll
have to just come to
compare
the
it.
entire thing again from top to bottom.
Well, it's really not that extensive, actually. I mean, it's not.
Okay. I mean, the individual amendments are going to be posted specifically, not in the context of the overall the waterfront
There's a
overlay
proposed planning
document.
study that will be posted.
Okay.
And then the 3 proposed local laws will be posted as well.
Okay.
Peter, is there a request with that? Are you looking for a track
Well, I
change?
just, in the previous, yes, having now studied however many iterations of the draft that there have been in the earlier form-based code documents, you had to, sort of go through with each version of it next to each other to go back and forth and see where the changes were.
I'm sorry, are you asking for track changes of the existing code?
Of the new draft, these new changes to it versus the previous version that was publicly posted that we've been looking at since July or whenever it was.
Okay.
That would be helpful to those of us who are trying to see what's being changed. Okay, thanks.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Miller. I live on Redwood. And I want to first of all thank you all for the great job you do and appreciate your time. So as a resident, and I understand today's not the day to talk about our personal needs, I am asking about communication and how I can get better informed so that I can take the trip out here, do have 2 homes, and find that when it is our time for the people that care about our community to be involved and how I can get involved in more communication.
But we do have a website. where-
I've been on the website, but I found out about this yesterday, and is there a better way that us people that live here sometimes and sometimes don't get to have a better way of knowing which meetings would be better for us to be advocates for our needs?
Do you get Safe Sag Harbor newsletter? Because we try to alert people to what.
I've done the newsletter, but I don't think that today's meeting really was specific about what the agenda was, and that we couldn't really speak about what our agenda was.
Get the agendas for these meetings?
Yes. So my specific question is there any other form of communication, and do you have those dates yet about when the specific, I'm specifically interested in the cell tower. So will that be a specific thing, or how will I know?
Our calendar, our month-to-month meetings are on Tuesdays, second Tuesday of every month. Special meetings are posted either at a meeting or on the website. I think we're going to propose a work session between now and the next meeting. The agendas are published on the website. Common complaint is the agendas appear very late. That's the product of the.
That's kind of what I'm referring to.
Yeah, and this, I think, was a bit exceptional given the workload. But yes, I think the website is your primary go-to, you can control. It's there 24 hours.
For specific applications, if there's going to be a public hearing, it's also noticed in the paper.
So that's what I thought this was, so.
There are also alerts that you can set up from the website. You get alerted that there are
Yeah.
meetings.
You
You
can-
know about those.
Yeah, you can set up for alerts. If you go to the website, you can create an account and then you can sign up and you can either get them by email or by text. And there's a lot of information comes by, and I get 2 or 3 days sometimes. The village is really good at disseminating that. And perhaps you could do a focus on upcoming issues that are going to take, to a point of important issues that we know are coming down the pipe, that they may be noticed that way as well. I'm not sure if that's a legal way of doing it.
I think I would agree in this case, but if they've been working so hard, it's like the last minute. I don't think this would be the typical protocol for alerting people, but I know what you're saying.
Yeah, it's kind of,
Everyone in this room.
it's kind of last minute, but that's okay.
Well, the next meeting is November 9th.
Yeah, with a possible work session in between.
The agenda is always posted the Friday before the meeting at 4 o'clock, so we do post it at the end of the day.
So November 9th, okay.
And does that get noticed then through the messaging system? Once the agenda is posted?
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't, 'cause it's posted for the
Yeah.
It's posted. The
Your minute track, it's separate from Civic Plus.
next thing in discussion, the cell tower?
Uh,
Tonight?
It is on the agenda tonight, yes.
Yes, it is on the agenda tonight.
Any other comment on the introductions? All right, thank you all very much. Stay tuned, a lot of work yet to be done. So do we need any more action on this?
No, not ours.
Okay. Next up is a public hearing, opening of a public hearing, or next step in the process for the installation of stop signs at the intersection of Harrison Street and Madison Street.
Motion over.
Motion made by Mr. Gardella. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so this is a public hearing on the stop signs at that intersection. And this is would invite.
Yes.
Yeah, so those who would like to be heard on the stop sign proposition on Madison and Harrison Street. Yes, Jay.
Jane Holden, why do we need a 4th stop sign on Madison Street? There's one when you come from Main Street between Madison and Union, and this Germain and Madison, and this Marsden and Madison, and it's not even a half a block away that you want Harrison and Madison. I mean, That doesn't make sense.
Well, it's more than a half a block away. We have a speed problem on Madison Street. We have a vastly increased volume on Madison Street, and both Madison, Grand, and Third Marsden, all are turnout streets for school buses. At the height of the day when some of the fastest moving traffic is moving along. And it is a simple attempt to slow that traffic and make it safer for school buses and everybody else on that street.
It just seems like an awful lot of stop signs in the village.
Well, that's the best solution that we've been able to come up with. Any other comment on that local law 265? With that, I'd hear a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor of closing indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The hearing is closed. Would hear a motion for the enactment of item number pending local law number 265.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion is agreed to. We move next to a continued public hearing, and this is adjourned. The next item is the original introduction of the new zoning plan. So we adjourn that entirely. Next are action items. The first is the proposition to return the replacement facility to the WLNG site on Redwood Road. Recall that this was a so-called cell on wheels was authorized last winter for that site to improve by Verizon, to improve their service in an area where there were high level complaints about reliability and service. It's part of a larger pattern that we've struggled with in the village. In the meantime, we have completed the installation of a additional Verizon facility in the cupola of the village hall. And the company has now applied to bring back or a substitute for the temporary facility they had moved away in August and now propose to bring it back. To my understanding, this is a slightly different version of what was there before, and the resolution is to offer this as an alternative. I think what we need to do is to open the item without prejudice. So is there a motion to open resolution number 11-1? And a second? Second. Okay, all those in favor, Kate, say something, Kate by saying aye. So this is on the temporary cell tower on Redwood, and would hear commentary.
Robbie, just one quick comment. As I understand, this was for emergency use, and that's what it was given for in the first instance. Is that correct? And emergencies to me have to do with storms, usually in this village of water. So I would advocate that if we need an emergency cell tower or a temporary cell tower, to be moved away from the water.
Hi, Emma Hamilton again.
Welcome back.
Thank you. For Redwood Road, I have here a letter. I'm representing over 200 members of a group that reside on a wide range of areas around the cell tower, both in proximity to and in view of. And I'm going to read the letter and then submit it. Dear Mayor LaRocca and the Village Board of Trustees, we wish to express our concern about the application for reinstatement of the temporary cell on wheels (COW) at the WLNG radio station 23 Redwood Road. We hereby request that the application be denied on the following grounds. 1, the previous cow was approved and installed on an emergency basis without public comment or review by any other committee or board with respect to the potential impact of such equipment in the wetlands and or in a historic district. However, the day before Hurricane Henri was forecast to hit Long Island this past August, the cow was removed, quote, due to the emergent need of the temporary facility to be utilized at the US Open and or other events, according to the request for the proposed replacement dated August 19th, which is before you now. It would therefore appear that the emergency basis need for the cow is in question. 2, while a cow is less somewhat intrusive than the proposed permanent tower at 61 feet tall, it is nonetheless an eyesore for homeowners within the view of the tower and for all those who pass by on foot, by vehicle, or by boat. In addition, it creates a space issue for the radio station bus, which when parked diagonally in front of it encroaches on the street and becomes a further eyesore. It is also unclear how the 61-foot tower height is being established and enforced. We assume the height is based upon elevation datum at the base of the tower, but there is no information to confirm this. Is the cow 61 feet above the surrounding area or the road? Does the height include the base that the tower sits on, or is that additional height to be considered? 3, the cow is potentially disruptive to the wetlands surrounding WLNG. Again, because it was installed on an emergency basis, a thorough review of the impact of yet another commercial vehicle and cellular equipment in the environmentally sensitive Upper Cove, also a major flood zone, was never conducted by the Harbor Committee or anyone else. At the very least, this review should happen before a cow is reinstated. 4, the new cellular antenna in the municipal building has considerably enhanced coverage in the area, potentially rendering a cow unnecessary. Has a coverage map been submitted demonstrating continued need? In addition, we understand plans are underway to install cellular equipment near the impound lot, and also that the mayor recently toured the village with Verizon looking at alternate sites for cell equipment. We respectfully request that a report on current coverage gaps and the status of these explorations be made available for public consideration prior to voting on the reinstatement of the cow. 5, based upon the site plan submitted with the application, the new cow is substantially larger than the previous one. The site plan notes call for 4 separate and distinct transmitters, temporary support equipment, guide wires, etc. But there are no elevations nor images of the proposed tower and ancillary structures, so we have no idea what it will look like. Nor are there any installation details such as temporary foundations, remedial repairs to disturb wetlands and wetland buffer, or screening of the tower and radio station bus. There is no information on the 2 20-foot by 8-foot and 16-foot by 8-foot temporary equipment trailers referenced, nor is there any reference to emergency power. Will a generator be installed? And if so, why is that not included on the application? At the very least, this application should be deemed incomplete until further information is provided and can be reviewed by the community. 6, the first temporary cow was installed at the radio station in July of 2020. The initial approval period was 8 months. The permit was then renewed in February of 2021. If the applicant can continue coming back ad infinitum for extensions of temporary approvals, what makes this installation temporary? If this application is approved, we request the establishment of a set time frame after which permission can no longer be extended. 7, the long-term existence of a temporary cow on the property could set a precedent for the future approval and installation of permanent cellular equipment on the site without proper due process. We believe there are multiple other site options for cellular equipment that could improve service in the village without creating such an enormous eyesore and potential environmental hazard, and without the immediate proximity of residential neighbors in a historic district. Based on this and all the foregoing considerations, we respectfully request that this permit application be denied. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Two quick things. I don't know where you got that I've recently toured the village with Verizon.
I'm not at liberty to say that it's a rumor that's been circulated.
Okay, it's not true.
Okay.
So I would just caution about the repetition of rumors, which I know the village thrives on, but I made no such trip with Verizon.
But I did say apparent.
Well, apparent doesn't.
I mean, the letter says apparent.
Yeah, you have to understand the press is in the room and that I did not make that tour.
Okay.
Number two, you said there are alternate locations. Do you all have lists that you would have us?
We
look
do
at?
have a list, and that list can be viewed at sagharborcelltower.com.
Well, I would appreciate if you include that with maybe as an attachment to the letter.
Sure.
The letter is coming to us. But thank you.
Would you like me to submit the letter here or?
Sure. Just give it to Kate. And then just send on the attachment.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other comment? Yes, sir.
Verizon has been building.
Sorry, tell us your name.
Nobody has one, I live on Plymouth Street. Verizon has a network over on. Setbacks.
Yeah.
We don't have property in the real. Has that been considered?
I don't know what they considered.
Well, this.
I wasn't on the
They're
tour.
requesting it, is that correct?
I'm sorry?
Are they requesting this tower, Verizon?
They've requested the continuation of the Redwood site using a different device. That's the only application before us in terms of their temporary
Or
use.
just for that device on Redwood Road?
That's the only application. Well, that's the only application before us tonight, yes.
Okay, so
There is
no-
down the line to do with the radio tower, but that's not a subject for you tonight.
Okay, that's fine. Because AT&T also has a tower up in the hills.
Yes, I know.
I'm sure Verizon uses that tower also.
So what your thought was about the station on the Turnpike
The Turnpike,
as
they
an
have-
alternative site?
Yes.
Right,
Exactly.
I understand.
I'm on Redwood.
Thank you.
Hillary Loomis, I'm on Redwood too, and just aesthetically, it ruins that whole code view. I mean, beyond the fact that it's an area that gets flooded, it's a historic district, it's a ridiculous place. I mean, unfortunately, there's a radio tower that's pre-existing it, which ruins it as well, but it's not a good place for a cell tower. I mean, it's a really lovely aesthetic place, and it shouldn't be there. I know there's other places, either at Verizon or some else, anyway, but it should not be there.
Thank you, Hillary. Yes, sir. Roman.
Yes, hello, Roman Lawson. And I live on Redwood. I have a very quick question.
Repeat your name. So we can
Roman Lawson.
Yes.
And I live on Redwood. I have a very quick question, just asking whether the code has changed, village code has changed regarding any cellular towers or telecommunication
Not
towers.
during this period, no.
In which case, well, according to the code, this would not be even considered.
No, this is temporary in nature, it's on the wheels, it's not a permanent structure, that's the distinction.
But yes,
Cell
well,
tower, any permanent application for a permanent cell tower on any site in the village will have to go through a special exception review. And in this particular site, it will require review by the harbor committee, the planning board, the zoning board of appeals, and the village board of trustees before the permanent structure could be installed.
I see, I see. And I'd like to pick up on that point that when does temporary facility become permanent? Or, you know, how many times can you renew the application? Thank you.
Your name again?
John Jones. Yes, just a thought, because I think you mentioned that when you noted that the trustees separate cell towers from the other variances. I was on the board when that happened. And there was a reason for that, because there's an understanding that technology changes. And you don't know which direction it changes. I grew up with rabbit ears and television and everything, you know, and now we have setbacks. So you don't know if things get, you know, how they happen, and get smaller or larger. I think there needs to be a planning process when you talk to some of these, you know, companies, you know, including what their future plans are. I know, Tom, you've done a lot of work on this, I know AJ has too, but I do know that some of this technology is going to be outdated before long, because 5G technology is not these kind of towers, especially for this size village. So I just want to be a little bit of a historian about what the logic was, in the same way that you're looking at 3,500 square foot buildings. It was for this reason, for some cannabis too. So I do think there are other sites, and I hope you consider that.
Thank you.
I agree that 5G technology is typically more smaller receivers of antennas, like smaller than 2 feet. So they fit on poles.
They're localized.
They're localized, so that may not, I mean, for them, is a pay to wire up redwood, I don't know. but-
No, I just mean that, when we talk about cell towers, we're talking about, there's a radio tower there, so it makes sense, I'll put other things on it.
Right.
5G wouldn't be put on there. But I think part of the reason for the original law was almost envisioning that LNG wouldn't be there. It is on the water, there's a lot of other things, it's a community resource, but I'm not only not a engineer about water, I'm also not an engineer about structures. But I am.
All right, let's finish this item.
Sorry, Emma Hamilton again. I'd just like to add a personal note that the letter was on behalf of a large group of people. This is just my own personal request. Mayor LaRocca, you said tonight, first of all, in the new proposed waterfront overlay district, the WLNG property is included.
Yes.
And your words tonight, and I wrote them down because they impressed me, were that the goal of the new overlay was to protect, preserve, and nourish what we have. And I don't believe that a cell tower in the wetlands in a historic district in an area that floods on a regular basis as recently as during Hurricane Henri protects, preserves, or nourishes what we have. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Do we have any, I was looking for information on this application in here, just to know what does it look like? What do we vote on something?
I think we should table this until we get more information.
Yeah.
From the cell company. I mean, a lot of the concerns that were brought up need to be addressed.
Absolutely.
So I think I would move to table this.
I'll second that.
And is there a second?
Second.
I agree with the motion. I would make one observation in this recent history. Particularly, Emma, you described that this came in as an emergency matter. There were a couple of dimensions to that. One is, and Tom being our public safety trustee, was concerned at the time that we were aware that the 9/11 system was not receiving incoming calls. This is the height of the season and the height of the pandemic. And so that was a big consideration about seeing it as an emergency. The emergency, if you will, then had two parts. Residents who were expressing concern to us directly. So it was very compelling, at least to me at the time, under all of the other pressures of the pandemic. And number two, that it was in terms of people's regular convenience, that they were being isolated because of the failure of the system. In August, I will tell you that I was not happy to learn that the era of the emergency was ending because of a tennis tournament in Queens. And so in the face of an approaching hurricane. So I think the people from Verizon did themselves enormous harm in terms of their credibility in the community and the attitude it conveyed to the community. And I've expressed that to them, that I thought what they did was inappropriate and untimely and without defense. And the change from one form to another was not a matter of consultation. It was a matter of simply informing us that this is what they were doing. So some of the predicates for this action that we approved some time ago perhaps have changed. So I think the Deputy Mayor's motion makes great good sense at this time. It's clear the community has not had enough information. This board has not had enough information. So if there are other comments, if not, I would invite the vote on the motion to table this item.
I made the motion.
I second.
All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion is denied. Or, is there any no vote? And the motion is approved and the matter is tabled. Okay, next up is the authorization for the mayor to sign the Clean Vessel Assistance Program Annual Operating and Maintenance Agreement.
Is still a meeting going on?
Yes.
You can't hear because there's.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Is there a second? Okay, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the motion is agreed to. Resolution to appoint Kate Locascio, position of village registrar. One of the many treats that goes with their new status as clerk is now the village registrar as well. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
The next up, appointment of Kate Locascio to the position of village records officer. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Resolution to appoint Kate Locascio as the Freedom of Information Officer, effective October 13th.
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Half Wheels of the Sag Harbor VFW request permission to have the Veterans Day Parade from the Civil War Monument to the American Legion on November 11th at 10 a.m.
I'll make
Is
the
there a
motion.
motion?
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
President O'Brien of the Ambulance Corps requests authorization to add new member Cameron James Lothian to the insurance rolls as a probationary member. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion is agreed to. Chief McGuire requests the village sponsor the following three candidates to attend the part-time police academy at the Suffolk County Police Academy. Jillian Belfiore, Otis Cantrell, and Courtney Thomas. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Sag Harbor Community Rowing request authorization to use Cove Park for the Community Rowing Club from April 15, 22 to November 15, 22. It's the summer program. Also requesting a 5-year lease at the annual rate of $1,500. This is a restoration of the fee that was discontinued 2 years ago. And I urge the rowing association to come back with a fee because we are providing important public property to them, and they have agreed. So is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion is agreed to. Alicia is Bardis, the PTA requests permission to have a Halloween parade through Main Street on Friday, October 29th from 1 to 3 p.m. Good news for the village, are continuing coming out from under, and the children love it, and the school is running it. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Authorization to refund the following 2020 small claims assessment as listed in the agenda. Is there a motion?
I'll move it.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Gavin Manu, President of the Chamber, requests permission to have the annual pumpkin trail on Sunday, October 31st. More Halloween excitement. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
President Manu also asked permission to have the Columbus Day sidewalk sale on Main Street on behalf of the Chamber on October 9th and October 10th, from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. What's that?
We're in a time machine.
It's a little late on, no, well, the dates are.
Oh, this is in the category called retroactive, which is a new category, but thank you, Jay.
I made the motion.
Yeah.
Second.
And you made the motion 3 days ago.
I did.
As I recall.
Exactly.
Okay.
From the beach.
From the beach. We won't say where.
No.
The harbor master requests the following: increased rates for both seasonal and transient dockage for the 2022 boating season, and approval of the revised berthing agreement for the 2022 boating season. This might strike you as early, but
Yeah, we skipped.
did I skip one?
Yes, I did.
I'll come back to that. The changing of the seasonal rates, and we did quite a bit of study on this over time. And we're bringing our rate structure up in line with some of the competition and also the increased very high level of services that we produce. And so the schedule for all that is in the attachment. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
There a second?
Second.
All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Sergeant Labrosi requests authorization from Police Officer David Hanson, Police Officer Kelly Anderson to attest the advanced roadside impaired driving enforcement training on October 14 and 15. This actually refers to a future event. Is there a motion? Is there a second? All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Authorization for the mayor to sign the contracts for 2020 Community Development Block Grant, CDBG. Motion second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Authorization for the mayor to sign the contracts for the 2021 Community Development Block Grant. Motion.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
excuse me, number 15, the harbor master requests authorization to obtain 3 written quotes. Did we skip that?
I'm sorry. I
Marine
did.
dock.
I did. The first half of the replanking of Marine Park with 4 1/4 by 6 Purple Heart lumber. This would include resetting the electric pedestals, ladders, and cleats. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Now that I've totally bollocksed up, where am I? I'm
19.
on number 19. The resolution, the October 21 budget transfer. Motion, second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion for the treasurer, Tim Bullock, to attend the Advanced Accounting Forum in a virtual manner on October 26th and 28th.
I'll make the motion.
Second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Authorization for Chris Talbot and Keith Payne of the Building Department to attend the Tri-County, New York State BOC training from November 16 to 19 in Kingston, New York.
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Rich Scavone, Secretary to the Sag Harbor Fire Department, requests the following: accepting the resignation of Jeremy Clint and Dylan Willingham in good standing and remove them from insurance rolls, and move Nick Smith from the active probationary to full active member status, effective immediately.
I'll regretfully make the motion. I believe that these young gentlemen have moved away. We're in the process of it.
Right. Further evidence of a continuing problem that we have. Is there a second? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Read you, Jennifer Folks of I Try request special event permit for a walk on Main Street starting at Matriarch and ending at the Windmill on October 27th, from 6 to 7 p.m.
A great organization. I will make the motion.
Is there a second? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Colleen Gregonis of Sag Harbor Fire Department Ladies Auxiliary request special event permit for Girls Night Out fundraiser at the main firehouse on October 21.
I'll make the motion.
Second,
Second.
all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Debbie O'Brien, President of the Sag Harbor Volunteer Ambulance, requests authorization to hire Joseph Tropia, EMTB, as on-call EMTB slant driver, the hourly rate of $20.50, effective immediately.
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Take the next items in bulk. This is the improvement of payment bills. Motion to approve warrant number 18, 19, 20.
Excuse me, Mayor.
Regis?
We're missing, there's a couple more on the agenda. 26, 27, 28, 29. I don't know if you have that.
I started this copy.
26.
26. Okay, appointment to appoint Fran Scavone to the position of wastewater treatment plant operator. Is there a motion?
I would like to make that motion. Congratulate Fran on making this milestone. Great.
I'll second that.
And he continues to be a real asset. to this village.
Yeah.
All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Resolution to authorize an intermunicipal agreement with the town of Southampton for fire marshal services.
I'll make the motion.
This came up today with a question about the amounts involved. Have you had a chance
I
to,
talked to Tim and
you're ready to proceed?
I think we should proceed. I don't see as we have a choice, really. I mean, then we could discuss further what the payment's gonna be.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure that we covered that.
Yeah. Well, the agreement with East Hampton Town expires October 15th.
Right.
So
It's-
there's something we need to put in place as soon as possible.
Okay, so the motion is made by Mr. Gardella. Is there a second?
Mayor, if you want to speak. Well, Tommy said it. It ends on Friday, our extension with East Hampton, so it's vital that we have those services.
Right, okay. So I think we gave it adequate consideration and the fact that we don't have an unlimited series of choices here.
Second.
The second is Ed Hay. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, the motion is agreed to. A Resolution approving the appointment of Heather Zakowski as office assistant. This is in the building department. This is a return of a young woman who has served us before, and we welcome her back. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Natagosi of Sag Harbor Inn requests permission to erect a menorah on the grassy area of Long Wharf to celebrate Hanukkah beginning on November 22nd. This is an annual event that Nat has provided.
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the matter is agreed to. Now, the approval of the payment of bills. Motion to approve the payments in warrant 18, 19, 20. Wait. This is what happens when there are three versions of the agenda. 21. Okay. Well, yeah. The envelope.
I'll make the motion for.
I'll second.
I need your envelope. These are three late additions to the agenda. First is making some payroll adjustments for civilian personnel, namely Carrie Garapi, Gigi or Georgianne Oberlander, and well, that's a separate motion. So we would hear a motion on those two adjustments as contained in the attachment.
I'll make a motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
And similarly, a motion, the judge of the court has asked us to make an adjustment to the compensation for the village court clerk. That comes under our purview as an appointment of the court. And would hear a motion to adjust the compensation of Leslie Murray as indicated in the resolution.
I'll move it.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion is agreed. This is a motion to add the deputy treasurer to the village health insurance plan under special arrangements for part-time personnel. And the level of coverage and the employee contribution is as it is for all employees, all full-time employees. We hear a motion on that.
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
The next item is a motion to approve or to authorize the mayor to sign an agreement with Chesterfield Associates contractors and engineers for phase one of the walkway for Steinbach Park at the amount of $211,750. This is phase one of what will be a three-part connection of Long Wharf, Windmill Beach, and Steinbach Park with a fully Americans with Disability Act configuration, and a very important commitment that the village has to ADA access. And we've had in this proposal, as we've had over the course of Steinbach Park, a debt to Ed Hollander, who pulls in these donations and lowball contributions that the community has been willing to make. So I would invite a motion to approve my acceptance of the contract.
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And I think I'm finally out of things I overlooked. My apologies to all. Any other business to come before the good of the order? Is there any other public comment?
I just wanted to, regarding the handicap park on the east side, that's difficult for the passenger to get out of the car. You really need to look at the handicap park.
I hear you, and I will,
I greatly
I'll be over there
appreciate it.
tomorrow.
And as far as, I grew up in Redwood. We were the only family that lived there all year round. When there were nor'easters, Redwood became an island. My brother's friends would get there so they could call their parents and say they couldn't go to school because they couldn't get out. And I watched them raise the road. They put in ship to shore. The houses that are on the north side of Redwood Road where it dips down, they were built on fill. I was there for Silly Swamp, which had towers on both sides. That's all fill when they dredged all this. Please make a decision on environmental things, not on, I don't like the look of it. Any person in here who said they live in Redwood purchased their house after that radio station and as long as that tower's already been there. They knew it was there when they were born. But it was just annoying because all of a sudden now they want to properly change the way it. It's been there since 1965.
Thank you. Anybody else? Hear a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Thank you very
Any
much.
objection?